to compete for the, unless you want to spend the rest of your life operating machinery and making shoes and, working like a slave, basically, or something like that. You need to play the game. And if you play the game, it means you have to, if you reach a certain status, you need to, in school, join the Young Pioneers, the Communist Party, the Youth League, the Communist Party, and later on in life, the Chinese Communist Party itself. If your company reaches a certain level of status, the employees will be forced to join the Chinese Communist Party. When you join the Chinese Communist Party, you need to join weekly study sessions, you have to pay party dues, it's a cult. The CCP is a cult. And you are forced to be a member of their cult if you want to have any status in society. And so, what happens is, if you want to have any kind of benefits, if you want to have a slightly better life, you need to engage in political correctness. You need to report on your neighbor. You need to get engaged in the local persecution of whatever religion it is. You need, if a woman has 2 kids, you need to go and help the local villagers murder her second child, which happens a lot, or when they had the one-child policy, that happened a lot, by the way. Or the whole town would be persecuted because a woman had 2 children. Horrific stories, including women having their infants ripped from their arms and killed in front of them. And that's what they call political correctness in China. So you need to demonstrate loyalty to the party if you want to have a better life. And if you refuse to do that, you're going to be the one who gets persecuted, not just by the party, but by everybody around you. Right? It's like a social level persecution. It's like the bucket of crabs. Anyone hear the bucket of crabs analogy? Where you don't need to put a lid on the bucket because the crabs keep each other in. If one tries to escape, they all pull it back down. That's the way that social persecution works, through incentivization. And that's what every communist country does, including the CCP right now, including the Stasi, including the Soviet Union, including Romania and Ceausescu, the whole 9 yards. That is how communist countries incentivize local level persecutions. They incentivize it by making quality of life terrible and then offering minor crumbs if you play the game. That's what they do. But now something else is happening. The U.S. Senate is looking to stop this. They're actually taking actions. This is the Select Committee on China. And they say this: to safeguard U.S. innovation and protect our national security, Chairman Representative Molinar introduced the Securing Innovation and Research Act, SIRA. You know, the legislation prohibits federally funded research partnerships with restricted foreign adversaries, restricts the sharing of sensitive dual-use research, meaning it can be used for business or medicine, but it can also be used for weapons and bioweapons and everything else, like dual-use civil and military, basically. Which in China, you have what's called civil-military fusion, meaning there's no difference. It's the same thing in China. And it also says, and increases transparency and oversight to prevent foreign espionage and technology theft. Now, why is that important? It's because this often happens at American universities. I've talked about it before. One organization the CCP has, which, funny enough, after I started talking about it, there's now been some actions to actually call it out and stop it. There's the CSSA, Chinese Student and Scholar Association, the CSSA. There are CSSAs at every major American university. What are these? These are publicly funded and operated by the Chinese consulates. If you're a student coming to study at Harvard or Yale or even just a small local college in the United States, you are often forcibly enrolled in the CSSA. So you're forced to be a member of it. And what this does is it creates a student, well, it's basically a student group funded, organized by the Chinese consulate, operated by a branch in China of the Chinese Communist Party that integrates every visiting Chinese student within a united front organization. So it involves the Chinese students, it involves the school faculty, it involves the professors. All the Chinese professors had to be part of it. It also involves the Chinese community, which is not the real one. It's the United Front. So the Tongs, the hometown associations, the ones the CCP controls. And it groups you in with that. And what does that mean? It means if you're a Chinese student, and there are a lot of good ones too, I'm not saying every one of them is like a spy, by no means. But when they're enrolled in this, if they join a democracy protest, they're going to be punished and they're going to be reported on because all of these people will spy on them and report on them, the leadership of these organizations. If like a human rights group goes to a college and holds an event, the CSSA will organize protests and try to pressure the college to cancel it. The professors at the university, part of the CSSAs, will do that too. The professors will go to the mainstream media and say, I'm a professor at so-and-so university, and America has offended the feelings of the Chinese people. These are Chinese government agents masquerading as professors, masquerading as students, and masquerading as community leaders. And they're Chinese Communist Party agents with the CSSAs, Chinese Student Scholar Associations. These still operate at every major American university. Now, why does it matter if the U.S. government is stopping science collaboration, research collaboration with the CCP? It's because what you have is you have Chinese professors and Chinese students with this Chinese government-run organization getting their people in, and then when they return to China, they bring the research with them. And so American taxpayers, we're paying for medical research, we're paying for weapons research, we're paying for like advanced, things that are supposed to benefit our society. They bring it back to China, they alter it a little bit or not at all, they register the intellectual property, they sometimes even sue American companies that are working on American-funded intellectual property in China and sue our companies and then steal it from us and then undercut us using government-funded businesses on the international market and put our companies out of business using the thing they robbed us with, using what they stole from us. This happens on an industrial scale. The Chinese military is involved with it. The military is involved in the cyber attacks. Insiders, spies, students, college professors, people they hire, people who betray the United States. They have the Torch program, which works on basically buying off American influencers. It's called the Torch program. There's the 311 program, 973 program. They have a whole bunch of them, right? All these programs where they incentivize theft and assist people stealing using hackers. And so you could be a college professor and you intentionally open up an infected email or open up an infected PDF document or open up an infected link and you're like, uh-oh, I accidentally compromised my entire computer network. Or you just take it and you go to China and never come back and you steal it. They work with the Chinese military on this. They steal the intellectual property. Once they go back to China, the CCP has industrial level organizations they call processing facilities. These operate at all the major Chinese universities. And what they do is they just focus on reverse engineering stuff they steal. So if they steal intellectual property, at the Chinese universities, they have organizations set up that just reverse, on an industrial scale, reverse engineer and copy everything they steal from us. Then they funnel that into, they have a mixed model economy. So they're like private businesses with heavy government control, like state-owned, they call them state-owned enterprises. Some are regulated through other ways, but basically all the Chinese businesses are tied in with the CCP. They feed the IP to those, and then they use that to go and put their products on Amazon, or compete with us on government contracts, or they funnel it to the Chinese military, or they funnel it to the Chinese medical system, which then basically dominates the medical industry, and we have to buy our medications from China. That's how all of this works. And it's been allowed to happen to an extent because of research cooperation. The U.S. Senate finally is working to stop this. Good on them for doing it. Now, something else big is happening, though, right alongside this. As this is happening, the National Science Foundation just rolled out a new policy to ban collaborations with Chinese Communist Party-tied researchers. If I can give a personal recommendation, expand this to the CSSAs, the Chinese Student and Scholar Associations. If you're part of the CSSA, the Confucius Institute, or any CCP-tied scholar organization, you should be barred from being involved in any kind of research collaboration. Science says this. The National Science Foundation has decided to ban collaborations between every U.S. scientist it funds and nearly all Chinese research institutions and their employees. It says the new policy abandons NSF's earlier attempts to balance the potential risks and benefits of such collaborations, but it puts the agency in step with actions taken earlier this year by the much larger Department of Defense and congressional Republicans who assert that any interactions with China threaten national security. It says the new policy posted on Wednesday and still being digested by university administrators, relies on lists of so-called restricted entities maintained by DOD, Department of Defense, and other federal agencies. It says the lists contain the names of hundreds of leading Chinese universities, national laboratories, and other research institutions. It says any interactions with, quote, the employees of such restricted entities is taboo, the NSF policy notes. It says there are a handful of notable omissions, however, including Tsinghua University, which last week announced it had hired away the 2025 winner of the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, Omar Yagi, from the University of California, Berkeley. In my opinion, they should not be making exceptions, because if you leave the door open, they're going to exploit that door. Again, the Senate is working to change this. NSF is rolling out policies to change it. The DOD has actually restricted a lot of this. A lot of the medical research, including gain-of-function research we've been doing with China, exposed by the former Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, when she was leaving, exposing how many organizations, Chinese-funded or government-funded research labs, virus research labs, that we've been working with. All of that's kind of getting exposed now. All of that is changing. And this collaboration is now, for the most part, but not entirely, coming to an end. Big developments. Now, look, meanwhile, something else is happening. The Pentagon is launching a campaign in the United States to go after people leaking sensitive intelligence. We'll be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break. And it's not supposed to be known, but somebody involved in the administration leaks it, probably for personal interest, because I have to think about why they're doing it. If someone gives me information, I need to think about why do you want to get this out? Because sometimes they're trying to use you, sometimes they're being politically motivated, they hate the administration, or they hate the military and they're trying to undermine it. So they use journalists as their tools to get stuff out. Sometimes it's foreign governments trying to get stuff out. As a journalist, you deal with some crazy stuff. You deal with people trying to compromise you. You deal with people trying to buy you off. You deal with people trying to use you. And so you need to be really discerning of what is the intent of why are you giving me this stuff. And so the standards you use, aside from not being compromised and being honest, is you also need to think about the repercussions of what you're doing. So if I were to get leaked information that America's getting ready to carry out a military operation, and cover is necessary for the effect of the operation, meaning if I report it and the guy they're going after, like a foreign terrorist or a foreign tyrant, goes into hiding and they don't get him because of my reporting, I have caused harm. If our troops go in and someone gets killed because that country was tipped off that we're going to go there, this is exactly what happened with the Bay of Pigs invasion, by the way. So one of the things that went wrong with that is journalists blew the lid on it. I'm responsible for that. It means I'm responsible for that guy dying, right? Because I blew the lid on it. And so as a journalist, I need to be responsible. This is one of the core standards journalists are supposed to follow, and most of them do not. These core standards I just mentioned are being violated, I would say, by every major media organization on an industrial scale. They're dishonest, They're compromised, they serve their advertisers, they're controlled by political interests, they're controlled by business interests, and they don't think about the repercussions of their actions. They're dishonest, they're manipulative, and they cause a lot of harm. And so as a journalist, if the Pentagon rolls something out like this, where they're basically saying, we're going to go after whistleblowers, and there's a big controversy right now because they're actually calling in, like I think New York Times reporters to testify on some of this stuff, and they're forcing some journalists to reveal their sources. It's complicated. I can say as myself as a journalist, I believe I was heavily political targeted, under the Biden administration. Because I was talking about January 6th, and I talked about problems with the elections, and I talked about COVID-19. I had to make judgments on repercussion and honesty. And my personal take was, I'm willing to take the consequences because I personally believed the public needed to know the truth about January 6th. They needed to know the truth about the election. They needed to know the truth about COVID-19 and the real origins of it. And if they want to persecute me for being honest, then so be it. But I did not believe I was harming people. In fact, I believed that the censorship and political persecutions taking place at that time were themselves harmful. So there's always a value proposition, which I understand you could argue some of the media organizations doing things in their way, maybe they're doing a value proposition too. But I don't believe it's always that way. Now, that being said, when it comes to national security issues and American military operations, what happens a lot is that people come out and tell journalists stuff because they don't support the administration, they don't support, maybe they're against, America sometimes, that you don't even need to be a U.S. citizen to join the military. It's actually a path to citizenship in the United States. You can become a citizen by joining the military. You have foreign nationals joining the military. And a lot of that is good, but you have some bad ones too. For example, the cartels in Mexico, they send their operatives here to join the military, train, get military training, and then go back to Mexico and train the cartels on U.S. military training, including like special forces stuff. That happens. So you have people with foreign allegiances in our military. You have people who hate our military in our military. You have people working against the United States, not on a large scale, but some of them working in these areas. And sometimes you have these people come out and they leak information to journalists, and sometimes they do it for foreign government interest. Maybe they're working for the Iranian regime. Maybe they're working for the Chinese Communist Party. And so they want to undermine the United States, and so they leak stuff. And then these irresponsible journalists publish it, and American troops get murdered because of it. Or a tyrant or a terrorist goes free and then goes on to kill other people because of it. As a journalist, if I did that, I would have massive regret because I would feel the blood of those people was on my hands. Which is why, again, with great power comes great responsibility. The access, the resources journalists are given needs to be handled with responsibility. Well, everyone, that's all for today. Thank you for joining us, and as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free.